Halo pemirsa IDX Channel, senang sekali saya Kezia7 dapat menemani Anda dalam special dialog, di mana hari ini juga kita akan berbincang dengan salah satu narasumber yang juga spesial di program yang spesial ini. Beliau adalah Executive Officer Country Head of Indonesia, MUFG Bank, yang adalah Mr. Kazushige Nakajima. Mr. Kazu, how are you?
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for your time. Mr. Kazu, so MUFG is one of the largest financial group in the world globally. So maybe would you like to share how MUFG actually survived during the pandemic, since 2022 was one of the hardest time, not only for Indonesia, but all around the world. How MUFG actually survived those pandemic?
Wow, actually that was a tough time for almost every financial institution globally, but we survived a lot. And in a sense, last year we made a significant recovery. And when it comes to the business in Indonesia, we made a significant recovery. The balance sheet growth was over 20% growth for MUFG Bank's business. And we have a subsidiary in this country, Bank Danamon and Adiro Finance. They made a significant growth last year. So now we are pretty much optimistic about the future.
So you are optimistic about 2023. So what actually the strong supporter or contributor from the MUFG to survive that 20% growth that you said? What was the most contributor?
Well, one of the largest client industry was automotive sector, which have shown the significant growth, particularly in the second half of last year, and we were pretty much supported by that move. But in addition to that, we made a significant improvement in penetration of a key client segment, not just in the automotive sector, but also some other industrial sectors.
So MUFG Bank, how MUFG Bank see Indonesia as a place for the financial sector, the investment? How attractive Indonesia?
Wow, maybe it is not just for us, but for almost all industry players. Indonesia seems to be one of the most attractive market because of the size of the economy and population, and it's growing. But more importantly, I think recently we are seeing the rising demand for quality. So there are many innovation is happening, or new services or products have been coming up. So that would be the great, in a sense, catalyst for the growth.
Oh, so the diverse market also one of the most attractive in. All right. So what is actually the most challenging time or challenging sector in Indonesia when it comes to pandemic last year?
Okay, well, particularly the total economic activities in this country has been significantly slowed down. So that was almost the toughness was exhaled almost all the industries. So we experienced some of the severe period, but actually, as I mentioned earlier, the recovery was also steep enough. So that was not like in other regions, like in Europe or US, which are still suffering from heightened inflation. So overall macroeconomic condition in this country seems to be very positive. Like inflation has been pretty much well managed, or maybe growth rate is still high enough. So I think from that perspective, so the country's economy itself is in far better position.
Okay. Speaking of inflation, we're seeing that a lot of prediction of global recession this year in 2023. Does it affect MUFG Bank in Indonesia?
In Indonesia, not that much. For some other regions, like in Europe and US, inflation rate is almost the double digit. So our business has been pretty much impacted by that situation. But when it comes to Indonesia, as I mentioned earlier, inflation is better managed thanks to several reasons. And our growth rate is high enough So I don't think, particularly after the COVID, getting into second half of last year, we are pretty much on a kind of BAU in terms of our business activities.
Okay, that's interesting. We'll discuss this more after the break. Dan pemirsa tetaplah bersama kami di Special Dialog. Pemirsa, kembali lagi di Special Dialog dan kita masih berbincang dengan salah satu narasumber yang spesial juga, Mr. Kazushige Nakajima, Executive Officer, Country Head of Indonesia, MUFG Bank. Mr. Kazu, in the first segment we were talking about recession, how it affects the world, how it affects Indonesia. How does recession actually also affect the MUFG Bank, also especially in Indonesia?
Okay, so I don't think the impact from the recession or potential recession globally hasn't been large in this country because of the better condition about macroeconomy, like the inflation has been well managed and the growth rate is high enough, particularly after the COVID period. So we are pretty much supported by that kind of positive macro environment. Well, we are doing almost like a business as usual.
Business as usual. But does the recession prediction become such a worry for MUFG's investment?
Well, I don't think we're gonna change our kind of investment selection or investment criteria. We always try to look at the fundamental value of the investment targets. So there will be always ups and downs depending on the macroeconomic situation. And now global environment has been pretty much challenging, particularly for some sectors like startups for funding or raising capital. But we always try to see the fundamental value of each of them. So we try to be committed and consistent.
Speaking of startups, recently Indonesia, and maybe not only Indonesia, but in the global picture also, there's a lot of tough time, a lot of challenges happen with startups. Some people say that investing in startup also potential, but in some way it is risky, they said. How do you see this?
Well, I think that's true. It's always some sort of risk associated with investment in some of the startup companies, but I think there are two aspects, positive and negative. And well, starting from negative, this kind of tough environment might kill some good business developed by startups. While for the positive side, tough time means it's a testing time. So if some of the startup can survive during this kind of tough time, that means the viability or feasibility of that business would be pretty much proven in a sense. So I think this kind of tough time would be leveraged from both aspects.
So actually the tough times becoming more natural selection for business survival. Yes?
In a sense, yes.
But does MUFG seeing this have more like specific measures in calibrating which one could be invested or which one is not? Does any changes seeing what happened recently?
Okay. So we are not a financial investor, rather strategic investor. That means of course we calibrate some of the financial return, but at the same time we always try to see strategic fit or synergies with our existing businesses in this country. So that's something pretty much consistent. So from that perspective, we don't change any kind of attitude or appetite in terms of the business, investment decision.
So it remains unchanged, right, Mr. Kazu? So seeing about investing, does any other specific sectors that you see as potential for investment?
So starting from our client segment, like some of the conventional sectors like natural resources or automotive or electronic sectors, energy, They are still very, very promising because of the growing macroeconomy of this country, supported by the growing population with demographic dividend, all kind of things. But at the same time, some of the newly emerging sectors like IT or some part of the B2C businesses, we are seeing some rising innovative kind of services or business model, and that are also very, very attractive. So we see them as a client target as well as our own investment target.
So about the B2B and also the fintech and other sector, does MUFG have special eyes on the new coming sector for this year, especially to 2024, saying that Indonesia also will be entering political year? Is it maybe specific or in any other selection for 2023 to 2024?
Okay, so starting from last year, we have done several key investments in this country. Like we bought the home credit business here, and we have invested in one startup, later stage startup, which is called Akulaku. And we also built a corporate venture capital called Garuda Fund, specifically for Indonesian opportunities. So now we think we are in a time to focus on leveraging these platforms together with our existing platform of Bank Danamon and Adira Finance, as well as MUFG Bank in this country. So we are always open for any kind of investment opportunities in coming years, while we are also pretty much focused on maximizing the value from existing platform.
Is there any different or the unique characteristic of Indonesian market or Indonesian financial sector from your perspective?
Well, I think every country has its unique element, but Indonesia, as we discussed, the growth potential is really enormous. And current size of economy within ASEAN country is large enough, but growth potential as well is pretty much high. And one of the unique part of this the macro environment of this country is Indonesia maintains democracy without falling into populism, so which is a kind of unique value within ASEAN market. And I believe this is also very, very positive in terms of doing business in this country.
So there's a potential, also there's a unique characteristic that makes Indonesia still attractive in this uncertain condition, global and domestically. That's so interesting. Kita akan lanjutkan perbincangan kita, pemirsa, tetaplah bersama kami. Ya pemirsa, kita masih dalam special dialogue dan saya masih bersama dengan Mr. Kazu. Mr. Kazu, we're talking about the political year in Indonesia. Indonesia is entering political year in 2023 to 2024. Does it really have maybe impact for the MUFG?
Well, so far we haven't seen any significant impact from the presidential election next year, and hopefully under the current administration, all the business environments seem to be fine. So hopefully this condition and environment would continue after the next administration.
So we hope also the good climate of finance and business still be maintained in Indonesia. Do you probably have, as a business actors, have a hope for Indonesian government, probably in political? We can say that political also affecting business in other way. Do you have any hopes for the Indonesia, especially for the government?
I think overall business environment has been significantly improved for past years, while every player in any industry has its own uniqueness or unique value proposition, and we always want to leverage that part to contribute to the country in terms of economy and society and community. From that perspective, I think flexibility is the key. So a bit more flexible approach about regulation and rule might be pretty much helpful for the players like us to make the meaningful business activities.
Yeah, the flexibility can be one of the friendly investment climate in Indonesia. Okay, we've been talking about MUFG and we've been talking about the business. We would like to talk about you, Mr. Kazu, saying that you have experienced for 25 years in this sector. What makes you stay that long?
Well, banking seems to be pretty much exciting to me because we are able to engage with various sectors, almost every sector in this country, well, for example. And I'm pretty much lucky to experience different places, including my home country, Japan. I have experience in working in 5 countries in total, including Indonesia, and each country has its own unique culture, unique way of doing business, and people. So that always fascinated me to stay in this sector.
So how about leadership, Mr. Kazu? Do you have a specific or unique leadership that you develop on your own, saying that a different environment you've been working with several countries and now here in Indonesia?
Okay, so again, I always try to be contextual, try to be relevant to each of the occasion and environment so that I can be flexible enough. But at the same time, ultimately, I am really keen to maximize the value of the people. So in order to do that, we need to be open and we need to share some of the so-called psychological safety among the people so that everyone can thrive in each area. So that's some part of my leadership approach.
Japanese is known for the philosophy of life, Mr. Kazu. Do you have one?
Well, I think my motivation being here in Indonesia, doing business here, is again to liberate the people's potential in this country. And of course, I always feel excited to experience the different culture, and at the same time, culture can be changed in some occasions. So if we can develop the better culture, depending on the situation and environment, to thrive, probably that would be the great achievement. So that's my motivation being here.
So actually talking about MUFG and also you, do you have any personal target of bigger target for the future, especially this year or maybe the next year?
Okay, so I think we definitely want to grow the business in this country. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we already, in a sense, set up almost full-fledged banking and finance platform in this country, ranging from wholesale banking into SMEs, consumers, and retails. So now it's time for us to maximize these value from the platform, and that's the main target of our business. And plus, in order to contribute to the economy here, I think a kind of developing some of the diversified industries or broad range of opportunities, newly emerging businesses, including some of the businesses through startups. And if we can contribute to the development of these things, that would be even more meaningful rather than the financial result. So that's something that we want to develop further.
Okay, and maybe in the next future, I hope the best for MUFG, also for Mr. Kazu. That was very interesting conversation, but maybe we have a little time. Dan thank you pemirsa IDX Channel, terima kasih. Dan itu tadi perbincangan kami bersama Mr. Kazu dari MUFG, dan semoga ini bisa menjadi insight baru bagi Anda dan juga referensi bagi Anda. Dan saya Kisha 7, terima kasih dan sampai jumpa pada kesempatan lainnya. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kazu.
Thank you.